My name is Arthur Duncan. I live in Munich, Germany, and for the last 27 years I introduce nice people to nice people around the world, primarily in the art sector, but people who have very specific tastes and cultural interests. And what I, in essence, do is open doors that not many can. I'm fortunate in that many people that travel with me, because I go to many places, are not limited geographically. Living in Munich for me is by choice. Obviously I'm not German, but I moved officially to Germany in 2002. Post 9/11, New York City, where I did live at the time, became a different place, like many places in the world. So living in Munich was a convenience that I could fly anywhere easily. And many people that I travel with today have been traveling with me for more than a decade, some people for 15 and 18 years. So people that call me, whether it's an institution, for instance the Louvre in Paris, or a museum in the UK, Italy, and now museums in China I'm traveling with as well, it's from that personal relationship. And I believe that what I'm able to do, because there are many doing cultural travel and cultural arrangements, I believe that I've been doing it longer, so I have a larger network, but also I understand, because of that longevity, what people really want to do. Because it's not a question of how much money you have, education, or even where you're from, but it's access to things and an edited experience, and that's what I can provide. It makes your time the most beneficial wherever you go, but also you see the most important things if by chance you never come back to that place. So I can organize things in Tokyo to Sydney, from Los Angeles to Beijing. And number one, I have the patience to do that, but number two, I am constantly challenged, whether it's the destination, whether it's bad weather, whether it's natural disaster, but I like that challenge, and I work exceptionally hard to make sure the quality is the absolute highest possible. It doesn't have to be the most expensive, but it can be the richest experience that you've ever had in your life, and that's why people come back. I've had a rather large business card for a number of years, and the first thing people say is, oh, it's so large, and the card has my name, my telephone, and my email address. And they turn it over, and I then say, this is 99% of the time when I meet people with my card the first time, you can draw pictures on the back. So the card is the access to me. Though I have a web presence, there's nothing other than a splash page that people call me, because my telephone number is on that page on the internet. So contacting me is usually by personal introduction. People find me. There have only been very few editorial pieces written about me by choice. I don't want to do that because physically I can't do that much. So I'm very selective, and people find me, or when I meet someone that I realize that it's synergetically a good fit, then I give my card to people. Or a museum hears about me from another museum, oh, you have to call Arthur. I prefer a group of no more than 20 people. 15 to 18 is an ideal size, because when I'm calling upon friends to, let's say, host a cocktail or a dinner or something in a private home, if you have a larger group, people are less willing, because it just becomes logistically a challenge. And I believe that, the biggest challenge is understanding what people really want. Because oftentimes when people say, oh, I want a red chair, they don't really want a red chair. So you have to understand human nature. And the challenge is having a dialogue in the planning phase to understand what it is people really want, whether an institution or a private individual traveler. So that's a challenge, but something that is universally part of my repertoire, and I've been very well trained by, I think, perhaps the best collectors and the best connoisseurs of the world. So I understand that, and it helps me. One of my greatest passions is thinking about the next generation. It isn't just the important and rich collectors, it's really about what their children or their grandchildren are going to do with that legacy or that responsibility. And I really have always had that as a mainstay of what it is that I do. There are definite signposts along the way and different benchmarks, and when I started this, it was quite by serendipity. I've traveled my entire life. I've been intrigued by art and culture my entire life. I have a dual heritage. My mother's from Mexico, my father's from California, so I grew up in Mexico. When I was 16, I lived in Peru. And when I began, I had finished a phase of my career where I had restaurants around the world, cooking in restaurants primarily. And I needed to change my life, I realized, because I was very successful, but I was in a kitchen 90 hours a week. And I wanted to have a life and a quality different than that. And my travel agent said, why don't you become a travel agent? And I said, I don't want to become one, but let me come in for 2 weeks. And that's how it began, because I realized that his clientele in New York City were people that I knew. And second realization was that they also were collectors of art. And that's how it began. And I was in the agency for 8 years and really developed this sort of niche market then, incredibly niche market. There are many people now doing that. So the changes, in those days, I believe that I was traveling with what I call the widows of Wall Street, wealthy women in New York City who had incredible Kandinskis on their dining room walls, and their husbands have passed away, and they would want to travel to some place, and they'd traveled all over the world. So my challenge was to take them to a place that perhaps they knew and provide an experience that they would not have had already. And the good fortune is that they knew many collectors already, because it's like a club, and there were very few who traveled at that level. So through them, I was introduced to even more collectors. And art fairs didn't really exist. This fair being an old fair, the Venice Biennale, which has been around for a very long time, those things existed. But it wasn't a competition every month where you have 6 or 8 art fairs or biennales in every corner of the planet. So the challenge now is really editing that even. Or when you come to a fair, let's say Art Basel in Miami, which I've supported since day one, when you have 22 satellite fairs, what can you not go to? Because you can't do them all. Otherwise you go crazy. So the challenges in how it's changed is, number one, the widows of Wall Street are long gone. And now the people who travel at this level tend to be much younger. They tend to be, rather than the widows, they're young couples who are very substantial collectors, or perhaps an older generation that wants to expose their grandchildren to culture, and they trust me with that because it's connected to art. So art fairs become a guiding force in the scheduling that I do, and my challenge is to make it efficient, your time when you come to a fair, and to not skip the cultural side of where we are. So those are challenges that only from my experience, I think I'm fortunate to have that ability to do that. What I always say is introducing nice people to nice people, but finding good homes for good things. And my belief has always been that it isn't about the trophy necessarily. I have very little interest in just buying a piece of art because it's a name where in 2 years or 5 years you can flip it on the market and make a lot of money. I'm very classical, and I think that you buy art or an object or a nice wine because you love it and you want to have it. That's what a collection is. And so it's making, again, from the years of experience, if, for instance, I'm in a fair, the people that I want to do business with, or the quality of the work that I feel is worthy of the price, are people that I know for 20 years. And so when someone's looking for something in particular, then I can be the intermediary. So I'm not a traditional advisor, but indeed it is editing who you go to and having access to work in a very discreet way, and not, there are many people advising in a very, very good way, and I know many. And oftentimes I will call an advisor and say, I think you should meet my collector, and hand it off in a way. And oftentimes I'm the direct intermediary for the work to a collector. My dream project would be to have a journey somewhere with a group of younger people, so I'm thinking teenagers to early 20s, that have already been exposed because their families, let's say, that are great collectors, and having one mentor travel with that group to impart information about what it is to be a collector in a place where it's the most incredible experience, and catering to a generation that would think, oh, how boring. And my challenge would be to create a trip that they want to go on. So that would be a dream. I always talk about generational handoff, if you will, and I believe a trip that would be 10 days or 6 days somewhere with a young group of people with one mentor. It could be an artist, it could be a museum director, it could be probably not related to anybody in the family, because if you're related, you're either embarrassed because that's your uncle, your grandmother, your father, but someone who they would trust, or even let's say a celebrity, having not Kanye West, but someone of that level, inspire them to do something of their own creation, and not just buy expensive paintings.